It's 8 o'clock. This is the UK Tonight. Coming up, the children of Grenfell, a special report at the start of a momentous week. More than 7 years on from the disaster, which killed 72 people, we hear from the young people who survived, who are looking for accountability when the official inquiry publishes its final report on Wednesday.
I feel guilty that I'm here living and doing all this stuff when obviously they didn't get a chance to, live and, do stuff that they wanted to do at such a young age.
I'll be joined in the studio by our correspondent Rachel Venables, who will explain what's at stake in the days ahead. Also ahead, a Conservative councillor's wife pleads guilty to stirring up racial hatred on the day of the Southport attack. Lucy Connolly called for hotels housing asylum seekers to be set ablaze. Her husband says she's an upset housewife who was sucked in by misinformation online. Plus, definitely, maybe, actually probably not, we'll discuss dynamic pricing as thousands of Oasis fans look back in anger at soaring ticket prices and websites that simply couldn't cope with demand. And Sir Ian McKellen tells Sky News why he's rushing himself back to work after falling off stage in June. Well, that's come, and much more on the UK Tonight. Well, it's the start of a momentous week for the survivors of the Grenfell Tower fire and the loved ones of those who died. More than 7 years on from the disaster, which killed 72 people, the official inquiry will publish its final report on Wednesday. And as they look for answers and accountability, the lives of those who called the tower block home are still scarred by trauma and loss. Sky's Rachel Venables has been speaking to children who survived the fire, who are now calling for urgent action to ensure another Grenfell can never happen. This is her special report.
Grenfell was the place where that was my first home, where I had my first steps, my first meal. They're now gone.
And how does it feel to come back?
It's been more than 7 years, and still they wait for justice.
There are definitely people to blame for this.
72 lives lost, a close community torn apart, and the suffering continues. Hundreds of children in the area are still being treated for trauma.
These traumas have a ripple effect and a legacy that goes on over the years and carries on as well.
But here today in West London, triumph stands alongside tragedy. Those who were so young at the time of the fire are turning into adults, and they have something to say.
We weren't allowed to speak as little girls and boys, but now we're older and we're making some noise.
The children of Grenfell have found their voice.
And where in the tower, where was your home?
So I lived at the back of the tower, just on this corner.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember in our living room, our window faced the park down there. And every time when my friends would be there, I'd shout their names from the window.
So you'd be like, be ready in a minute.
Yeah.
Amazing.
I don't think they would have heard me though, because I was so high.
But you could see they were there and you think, right, time to get my shoes on.
Yeah. It was really a nice space to live and to be with people. Every time when I would get into the lift, I would know people in the lift. I'd be like, oh, hi. My neighbours were amazing, like all of my neighbours. We had this neighbour called Mehdi, and he would always knock on our door. And yeah.
Yeah. Mehdi didn't make it, did he? And I guess in some ways that's the greatest cruelty of what happened is those children who didn't get to grow up. And we're talking to you about the 7 years and what you're doing, but do you think about him in that way and think about what the milestones he's missed?
Yeah, like I sort of feel a bit guilty. You know, you just think about I feel guilty that I'm here living and doing all this stuff when obviously they didn't get a chance to, you know, live and, you know, do stuff that they wanted to do at such a young age.
As her family fled the tower, Luana collapsed in the stairwell and was rescued by a firefighter.
I was in a coma for almost a month. When I came out, you know, it was, I don't know what happened. I was very confused. Yeah, it was very hard, you know, people telling you what happened and, you know, stuff that's changed now. Like, it was really hard.
You woke up to a different world, really, didn't you?
Yeah.
Her unborn baby brother Logan didn't survive.
I actually wrote one right there for my brother.
Grenfell's youngest victim. After the fire, the NHS simply couldn't cope with the number of children coming forward with mental health problems. So this specialist unit was created.
It doesn't feel like we're in a hospital right now.
That was the plan.
That was the point.
Everyone started talking about kind of really muted colours and we were like, it'll look like a hospital. And so that's why we kind of went with the dark green.
The Grenfell Health and Wellbeing Service has treated more than 1,000 children and young people, with a constant stream of new referrals each month.
The fact that, you know, we're 7.5 years on now and we still haven't had sort of the second inquiry report yet, that's just coming up, and there's still no decision around the tower and there hasn't been the criminal proceedings yet, that really has led to there being this sort of sense that this trauma is not over. One of the key things we see is avoidance of wanting to think about or talk about or look at the tower. So we still have children and young people now, 7.5 years down the line, averting their eyes and not being able to look at the tower as they walk past it as well, and feeling incredibly frightened. What we know about trauma and post-traumatic stress and traumatic grief is that children usually are born and sort of have a bit of a kind of bubble of safety created by their family and have a sort of sense that, generally speaking, the world is a safe place. And a trauma can sort of shatter those assumptions of safety and give them a sense of, oh, you know, terrible things can happen and people can be lost suddenly.
So many people rely on this place, but its future is uncertain. And with the story of Grenfell still unfinished, more children will keep coming forward for help. Abem is one of them.
Got my PS4. I got it when I was in Hilton, actually, when we were staying in the hotel after Grenfell. And I've had it with me ever since, so that's where I entertain myself sometimes and play games.
Do you remember the moment when you realised what had happened?
I look through the window, just looking through the window before I'm about to sleep, and I see a house, a tall building engulfed in flames. I don't know what it was, and then later I realised that it was my own home.
Explain to me your T-shirt.
This was my friend who sadly passed away in the tower. His name was Isaac Paulos, his initials IP, my best friend at the time. He was like my brother.
The children of Grenfell who didn't get a chance to grow up, how do you think they should be remembered?
They had bright dreams. Some of them could have wanted to be a footballer, wanted to be an engineer, wanted to be an architect, but it's just gone in one flame. Their dreams are crushed. It just makes me think of, it could have been me.
What your message is to people in charge?
I have a message for them that they need to remove the cladding of almost every UK building, because that cladding is deadly. It's when it comes to fire, it can destroy houses within minutes, within hours, like it did to Grenfell. Spread really quickly, and I have for everyone, please remove it, please.
Almost everyone knows Inez's story, even if they don't know her face. As she fled the tower, she grabbed her textbooks, sitting her chemistry GCSE the next morning.
I was just a child then. To me, I didn't think I did anything special. I just sat at GCSE just like everyone else. I feel kind of separate from that person. 7 years, a lot changes, especially between the ages of 16 and 23. I guess my biggest trauma was watching the building burning and people screaming. So the following year, when June came around and I was revising for exams, I had probably the biggest mental breakdown I've ever had before.
You say you were known as Grenfell Girl. When you think about the story of your whole life, as you are now at the start of adulthood, where do you want Grenfell to feature in that story?
I want it to be something that doesn't kind of like penetrate my thoughts daily. I don't want it to define me, but I guess it's kind of a reminder of how strong I was and how strong the community was after it.
The silent walk is about to begin.
On every anniversary of the tragedy, the people of West London come together. This year, it was the children's turn to be heard.
Hi everybody, my name's Yusra. Follow the adults on the silent walk. You must stay silent, make sure you don't talk. You mustn't speak, little girls and boys. You went through trauma but make no noise. Because of course little children know nothing about death. Their understanding is so shallow, their brains lack real depth. Yes, they saw their friends die, but do they really know what occurred? Only the adults understand what happened. We're the true connoisseurs. We weren't allowed to speak as little girls and boys, but now we're older and we're making some noise.
What did it do to your childhood?
I mean, there's parts of my childhood that I kind of blocked and I just don't remember. Like the year after the fire, I just don't remember. I don't remember living in the hotel. There was 5 of us. My mum was pregnant and we were living in a room. They didn't allow me to enjoy my time as a child. They messed up everything in my life. I had no home to go back to. I had no school to go back to. And even when we did go back to school, it was different. There was empty chairs in our classrooms. There's still cladding on buildings. You know, have they learnt nothing? It's 7 years on. You know, why does it take 72 people to die for you to even think, oh, maybe we should take cladding that might kill people off, and you still haven't done that?
For 7 long years, the horror of Grenfell devastated their childhoods. But these young people have hope for the future. Yusra wants to be a teacher.
There was one specific teacher who helped me get through secondary school. I kind of want to do what she wants to do, even if it's for one child and I make their life better. I think my job is done.
Inez has graduated and is travelling the world.
I don't really like to live life by knowing what I'm going to do in a month's time. So I graduated last year, I've been travelling since then. I'm just trying to figure myself out.
This autumn, Luana goes to university to study dance.
As cliche as it sounds, dancing, it's a way for me to express, how I feel, the emotions, I'm feeling inside.
And as Abem goes into year 8, he just wants other children to be safe.
We need to remove all the bad material, cladding. It could be an even worse material that we don't know. Please remove us. And if that happens, we will claim that it's justice.
Well, that was Rachel Venable's special report, and Rachel's with me in the studio now. Rachel, there are so many words you could use for those young people: remarkable, resilient. They have literally grown up in the shadow of Grenfell, many of them still living in the local area. That is an imprint on their childhood and a trauma they may never get over. But I think what was clear when they were talking to you is that, yes, they might have been young at the time, but now coming to be young adults, older, they want to use their voice. Because as, the young boy put it there so simply, how is there still cladding on buildings over 7 years on after what they have been through?
I think for those young people, the word I would use is inspiring. I mean, it was a real privilege to spend time with each and every one of them. And you're right, it's about understanding the trauma that they've gone through. They all lost their homes. Their sense of safety was shattered overnight. But I think for each and every one of them, so was their sense of justice, of an idea that something bad would happen, but then maybe it would be fixed, that they would be protected and safe. And I think to various levels, that's been shattered for all four of them. And I'm sure that's the story that's repeated throughout North Kensington, throughout that area of West London, particularly for the young people who lived in that tower block, who lost friends, who lost family, who lost neighbours, or who even just saw the fire that night. And that was something that I was really interested in finding out as well in speaking to the Grenfell Health and Wellbeing Hub, because it's not just the children who lived in the tower who nearly died trying to escape that they're treating. It's children who saw the blaze as well. For all of them, that bubble of safety that was described was shattered that night. And for 7 years, as they've grown up, whether from toddlers to going into year 8, as BEM is, or whether it's, you know, passed through university, these are such fundamental stages of development. And it's really been marred by this tragedy in a way that has also inspired them, like you heard with Yusra at the end there, into action, into calling for change.
It's a big week for the survivors of Grenfell and those who lost loved ones in the fire. It's the final report in this long-running Grenfell inquiry. It's worth reminding people what stage the Grenfell inquiry finds itself at this week, because this is seen as the accountability stage.
Yeah, so the Grenfell inquiry has been running now for a number of years. Phase 1 reported in 2019, and you'll remember that focused on the night of the fire. So there was a lot about the London Fire Brigade, about how their training and preparation was woefully inadequate, but they also found at the time that the primary cause of that rapid spread of that ferocious fire was down to the cladding. And phase 2, which is what's reporting back on Wednesday, is all about how the tower came to be in that condition, how it came to be wrapped or built and constructed in such a way that that fire spread so disastrously that the fire brigade couldn't cope. They were overwhelmed. And of course, 72 people lost their lives. And the evidence is focused on regulation. It's focused on the manufacturers of the products, whether it's cladding or insulation, on the council, on the recent refurbishment, and many others besides. And you're right, this is about accountability. So in thousands of pages, we'll hear why this happened, who was to blame. But obviously what comes next is a sense of justice. And as far as the victims and the survivors are concerned, as they hope change as well will eventually come down the tracks. This is a huge moment, but it's not the end.
Yeah, it's been such a long wait, but there will be more to come. But that final report out on Wednesday. Rachel, thank you. Really powerful report there from Rachel Venables, the children of Grenfell. Well, as we've just been discussing, Wednesday morning, that final report from the Grenfell inquiry will come out at 11 o'clock. I'll be live in central London throughout the day to gain reaction to what is published. We'll be hearing from the inquiry chair, survivors and those who lost loved ones. And at 8 o'clock that evening, a special edition of the UK Tonight focusing on the day's events. I'll be joined in the studio by survivors to get their reaction to the report, and we'll be hearing from firefighters and building safety experts. That's 8 o'clock on Wednesday night. Mass deportation now set fire to all the effing hotels. That is what Lucy Connolly wrote on social media on the day of the Southport attack, before going on to say that if that makes her racist, so be it. The childminder today pleaded guilty to stirring up racial hatred. Her husband, a Tory councillor, says she is an upset housewife dragged into the situation by misinformation online. Sky's Becky Cottrell has this next report.
Rioters attacked this hotel because it housed asylum seekers, a terrifying and racist response to misinformation spread online after 3 children were murdered in Southport. Lucy Connolly was one of those who took to social media after reading false reports that the killer was a Muslim asylum seeker. She posted, "Mass deportations now. Set fire to all the hotels full of the for all I care. While you're at it, take the treacherous government and politicians with them. I feel physically sick knowing what these families will now have to endure. If that makes me racist, so be it." Her husband is a Conservative councillor in Northamptonshire. He defended her outside court.
It's just a moment of, an upset housewife, really. Just seeing children and the reports with all the misinformation and just got dragged into it, and obviously she regrets it.
As politicians returned to the House of Commons, the Deputy Prime Minister condemned the disorder and discrimination.
This targeting of Muslims shows that we need to go further and faster in tackling this vile hatred, and it was fuelled by fake news. Last month's appalling violence exposed deep-rooted weaknesses in our society.
Lucy Connolly told police she didn't like immigrants and claimed that children weren't safe because of them. Officers found racist posts on her social media months before the Southport attacks.
Does she accept that the tweet was racist?
I don't think she is not that person. I'm not too sure, really. I mean, all I know is she's not that person. She's probably the opposite to that, actually. She really is.
Mr Connolly is expecting his wife to receive a substantial custodial sentence. She faces a similar fate to many others, those who joined the violence and those who may have inspired it. Becky Cottrell, Sky News, Northampton Crown Court.
The Foreign Secretary has announced the suspension of some UK arms sales to Israel. David Lammy says 30 of some 350 arms export licences are affected due to the risk that they could be used to violate international humanitarian law.
There does exist a clear risk that might be used to commit or facilitate a serious violation of international humanitarian law. This is not an arms embargo. It targets around 30, approximately 350 licences to Israel in total for items which could be used in the current conflict in Gaza.
Well, let's bring in our chief political correspondent, John Craig, who's following this development for us in Westminster tonight. And John, it doesn't seem that this move has pleased either side.
Well, political opponents have claimed that this was a gesture to, as some have said, appease Labour left-wingers, those Labour MPs who are pro-Palestine, pro-Gaza. Now, in the past hour, that charge has come from the Shadow Foreign Secretary, Andrew Mitchell, who said that this was designed to let me find it. He said that having looked at Labour's memorandum, it has all the appearance of something designed to satisfy Labour's backbenchers, while at the same time not offending Israel, an ally in the Middle East. It'll fail on both counts. That's a charge that's been made by a number of opposition politicians. Robert Jenrick, who is one of the candidates for the Conservative Party leadership, has said it's a shameful gesture designed to appease the hard left. Now, in the Commons chamber, that claim was also made by the DUP, Democratic Unionist Party's Sammy Wilson, who claimed it was all to do with pressure from constituents about Gaza. So Mr. Lammy was almost a bit sheepish, really, in announcing it. Not an arms embargo, he said. And he said it's not a blanket ban. It's only UK exports to Israel for arms are only 1%, and it's only 30 out of 350 licences. So Labour backbenchers were not particularly happy either, and he got criticised by Jeremy Corbyn, predictably. But it did not go down well at all in the House of Commons, and opposition seems to be growing. From the SNP, Stephen Flynn says it's too little, too late. Of course, the SNP earlier in the year put down that motion on Gaza, which led to a huge row in Parliament. So it looks like a gesture. And it hasn't pleased anybody, really. If it was to try and keep Labour backbenchers happy, that hasn't worked. And, of course, they're being attacked by their political opponents as well.
OK, John, thank you, John Craig, in Westminster for us tonight. Still to come on the UK Tonight, why teachers and school leaders are welcoming a change in the way that Ofsted grades inspections. And thousands of Oasis fans are looking back in anger at tickets being sold for inflated prices as the government promises a review of dynamic pricing.
Well, Second-Hand September started yesterday on the 1st of September, and that's our campaign, which is all about shopping second-hand, donating, reusing and restyling what we already have. So it's all around sustainable fashion and making the most of what we have in existence, because fashion has a huge water footprint. Well, fashion uses lots and lots of water. So essentially, if you were to buy a T-shirt second-hand and a pair of jeans, that could save 20,000, what the equivalent is of 20,000 bottles of water. So shopping second-hand is a really empowering individual choice that we can all make to circumvent the effect of buying fashion.
And you can get some absolute gems as well, can't you?
We can, yes. These are some recent finds, including my outfit today.
Oh, amazing.
So we've got some lovely linen trousers.
Oh, those are cool. So how much would you pay for something like this in store?
Well, I'm wearing a pair of designer trousers quite similar to this,
Yes.
and I found them recently for £9.99. So you can go online, Oxfam online,
cool,
and you can order some more pieces here. You can order donation bags, so we're grateful for all of our donations, which we get from the public. So around 90% of everything in store is donations and second-hand. This is a really classic cut, and I was very lucky to find it, so it would suit anyone.
OK, so what do people do? You said that you've got bags that they can
use to donate, but also we have over 500 Oxfam shops across the UK. We have Oxfam online. If people are looking to purchase any second-hand, we have a range of goods of treasure, all price points for all people. So you can find things from 99pk.
Regular viewers of the UK Tonight will know the story of Ruth Perry. Ruth was a head teacher who took her own life after an Ofsted inspection rated her school inadequate. Well, today, the government scrapped single-word ratings with immediate effect, saying that Ruth's death made the need for change absolutely clear. Sky Shaman Freeman Powell has this report.
You like this?
Yeah. Kitting out the kids, preparing for the start of a new school year. But it comes as the government announces an end to the old school rating system, deciding to scrap the one-word Ofsted grade and provide parents with more detailed assessments.
As a parent, we've got a lot to already deal with, a lot to read. We already inspect the schools by talking to other parents. You already look at the area, you see from going on the bus what the children are like already. Detailed report, yes, some parents may be into that, but a lot of us, come on now, it's too much paperwork already.
We purposely moved to Ealing because we were looking for outstanding school.
So that label was important for you and your family?
Yes, it was important.
When pupils return to school, those one-word ratings like outstanding or inadequate will no longer be used. Instead, schools will be assessed in 4 key areas, looking at the quality of education, behaviour and personal development, and assessing leadership performance.
Swimming? So is that you swimming?
And by the time kids head back to school next year, the government says parents will have access to new report cards, laying out what inspectors find in full.
This move today is about driving up standards, making sure that we've got a richer picture so parents can see in a more accountable way the real strength of a school and making sure we've got the improvements in to catch schools quickly.
Critics of the old ratings say the one-word system wasn't helpful for parents and placed undue pressure on teachers. It was the death of head teacher Ruth Perry that caused the shake-up of the system. After a coroner ruled, an inadequate school rating contributed to her suicide.
The inspection, its conduct, the outcome, the likely consequences, the delay, the whole system was collectively the cause of Ruth's death. There was nothing else The most visible feature of that fatally flawed system is no more. Thank goodness for that.
It's news welcomed by unions too, who have long called for reforms. And whilst the changes will apply to state schools immediately, it's expected that independent schools and colleges will follow. Shimon Freeman-Powell, Sky News.
Around 20,000 babies are admitted to hospital in this country every year with respiratory syncytial virus, otherwise known as RSV, and 20 to 30 of them die. It's an infectious disease that also poses a risk to older people. And in a bid to help ease pressure on the National Health Service, pregnant women and those over 75 are now being offered an RSV vaccine for the first time. Thomas Moore reports.
And I think the most important thing to think about is your little one coming up.
Just 3 weeks of her pregnancy to go, and Chiara is having a vaccine to protect her baby from the moment she's born. The jab is against RSV, a common cause of coughs and colds, but a virus that can result in life-threatening breathing difficulties, particularly in the winter.
One of my worries was to face a possible illness of the baby during this time, and yeah, the idea of reducing that risk is great for me.
Albie got RSV when he was just 6 weeks old, one of 20,000 babies a year admitted to hospital with the virus. He needed help with his breathing, but recovered. Now pregnant again, Amy can have the vaccine this time. She's anxious not to relive the nightmare.
He was so covered by machines and tubes, you couldn't even see his face. He was just like a bundle of blankets and all of these tubes coming off him. It's such a helpless feeling, and nothing I would ever want anyone to experience or go through ever.
The vaccine should reduce the risk of severe lung disease in the first 6 months of life by 70%. Currently, 20 to 30 babies a year die in England alone.
What's so good about giving the vaccine to a pregnant woman is that she will be then able to pass on her immunity to her baby. So from the moment her baby's born, her baby is protected.
There is a second spike of RSV cases in the elderly, and the vaccine is being rolled out to those aged between 75 and 79. That will reduce the risk of pneumonia. NHS England hopes the vaccine will reduce hospital admissions by 7,500 in the first year of the rollout, reducing pressure on the NHS and saving lives. Thomas Moore, Sky News.
Still to come on the UK tonight, looking back in anger, we'll hear how Oasis fans were left disappointed by the inflated cost of tickets as the government promises a review of dynamic pricing. Now, to the question we've all been asking each other today, did you get Oasis tickets at the weekend? Definitely, maybe, more like probably not. It's thought around 14 million people tried their luck at the weekend, and most of them are looking back in anger today after dynamic pricing saw the cost of tickets more than double. That's, of course, if you got that far. Fans have been sharing stories of being kicked off sites after being misidentified as bots, or being in a queue of tens of thousands only to find nothing left when they got to the front. Some might say it's what puts the business in show business. But ordinary fans feel that they're being ripped off and a master plan is needed to tackle the issue. Culture Secretary Lisa Nandy says the government will look at dynamic pricing as part of its review of the ticket resale market, calling the situation over the weekend profoundly depressing.
One of the issues over the weekend was that many of the fans who reached the front of that queue had no idea that they weren't going to be asked to pay a flat price. They thought they were paying one price and then found that they were being asked for hundreds of pounds more than they were expecting. That's something that we'll cover in the consultation. It will run over the autumn. What we're not consulted on, though, is whether the system needs to change. We're absolutely determined that we're going to put fans back at the heart of this system and take change seriously and deliver for fans a system that is fair, because that has been badly long overdue.
Yeah, not so much mad for it, more mad about it. Let's speak about this now with Roger Morton, who manages the band Razorlight, along with other bands, and alongside him, ticket security expert Reg Walker. Gentlemen, good to have you on the show this evening. This has been a real talking point since Saturday. It's pretty much the first question I've been asked, and other people have been asking each other every time they see someone for the first time since Saturday morning. I'm going to come to you first, if I may, Reg. It's worth explaining to people who perhaps weren't in that ticket queue at the weekend, because there were some people, what dynamic pricing is. I've heard it compared to surge pricing. If you use a certain taxi app, it's when prices go up at a time of high demand. Is that about right?
Sort of. It's actually sold to artists as an anti-tout, anti-bot tool. And what happens is a certain number of tickets for an event are parked to one side, then an algorithm allegedly works out what the market price is of those tickets and hikes it up. And the logic behind it is that the tickets become so expensive, it's not worth the touts buying them. In reality, you would have to dynamically price 100% of the tickets to make it an effective strategy. The average seems to be somewhere between 10 and 20%.
Well, it's used to sort of weed out the touts and the bots, but it seems that fans have ended up paying the high prices anyway without having to go through a tout.
Yeah, I think one thing that's not been mentioned much about yesterday was there were literally millions of bots operated by touts that were attacking the ticketing systems. And yet the primary ticket agents, Ticketmaster, C-Tickets and Gigs and Tours, managed to filter out and fend off a lot of those bots. So nearly 1 million tickets yesterday went to genuine fans at face value. And I think that's the point that's being missed. And considering the size of the tour and the demand, if you look on unauthorised secondary tout websites, there's very little on there compared to the total number of tickets sold.
OK, so we'll take a win where there's a win. It's sort of weeded out the touts and the bots. But, Roger, I'll come to you. For many fans, genuine fans, as Reg said, they either missed out completely. I mean, that was always going to be the case if there are millions of people trying to get tickets, or they simply paid more than they could perhaps afford to. You're hearing about some fans now, days after buying the tickets, going, oh, I couldn't actually afford it. But such was the emotional pull of Oasis, they forked out the cash.
Well, exactly. It's not particularly helpful, is it? I think it's kind of like going to a restaurant and you're saying, well, I go in and it says on the menu it's £20 for the meal. And then you sit down and 25 people walk in behind you. And then you look at the menu and a robot has changed the menu and now it's £60 for the meal. But by then you've already sat down and you've ordered a glass of wine. So it's that there is an element of entrapment with it, which is not great. It's not a great way to run a ticketing system. It's not a great way to run any system, really. Airlines do it as well, and many things do it. So I do think it needs looking at.
Yeah. Roger, talk to us about how much the artists, the band in this case, Oasis, how much they have to do with how much tickets for their gigs sell for.
Yeah, they'd be involved in the discussion, but it ends up being quite political. It ends up being many different parties involved in it. And, you know, you get different stories told about how it all works and how it doesn't work. So I don't think it makes particular sense to say this is just exclusively the responsibility of the artists. I think that it's a it's a systemic problem. And what it does is it adds an extra layer of cost onto something which is already really expensive. They might say, well, they're avoiding ticket touts, but what it actually does is to transfer the excess cost, which was formerly going to secondary ticketing, back to the tour promoters and the bands. So there is a kind of there is a benefit to the bands. I mean, bands are not philanthropic, so they're not inherently necessarily a philanthropic institution. So you kind of can't blame them with that. Some tours make money, some tours don't. Mega tours lose money as well. Promoters lose money on all sorts of things. So it exists in quite a complicated ecosystem of finance. But I do think that there are things that can be done to help.
Yeah.
And it's not down to individual.
No, it's very true. I mean, Roger, there's a reason why show business is called show business. You've got to have business in the title, right? You're there to make money. Like you said, they're not philanthropists. But Oasis have stayed quiet on this whole debacle over the last few days. Is that the right strategy, do you think? Because, you know, they're being billed as a working class band, giving back to their fans. And, you know, you've got fans paying 139% more than they originally thought they were going to pay. I just wonder if this is a bit damaging for Oasis. Do you think they need to come out and say something? What would you advise?
Well, they might want to say something eventually, but I understand my advice to the band probably would be actually to keep quiet at the moment. But I think that eventually everybody in the industry should look at it and go, this isn't working very well. Clearly people are really unhappy with it. And it happens in the context of an industry which is distorted anyway, to the extent that the trend over recent years has been for more and more mega artists, and newer artists are struggling. So within that, it would be wise for everybody in the industry to look at it and say, how do we rebalance this? Away from megatours and away from sort of questionable pricing systems.
Yeah, I mean, you make a good point there, Roger. You know, most bands, even some of the bigger bands, have standard ticket prices. It seems to be these mega tours. I'm talking about the likes of Adele, Taylor Swift, now Oasis up there. You know, this is the first time they've played together in decades. It's going to be the hottest ticket next year. So you can imagine it being at a premium price. Reg, I guess the big question is there a fairer, better way of doing this? I was talking to colleagues here at Sky and talking about tickets for sporting events where you enter a ballot, you know, you tick the kind of band price that you want to pay, like the different bands of pricing, and that seems like a fairer way. Why isn't it that music gigs don't seem to have that kind of system? Is there a better way of doing it?
There's really good technology out there, and as we've seen this weekend, Ticketmaster, C-Tickets, etc., put things in place to stop bots, stop touts, and put tickets in the hands of fans. The underlying problem is ballots. There's ballot stuffing technology that the touts employ. One of the touts for the ballot for the pre-sale last week signed up over 40,000 times, one tout. So that gives you an idea of the scale of the problem. And whereas 15 years ago, we were probably dealing with 120 top flight touts, now you're looking at 3,000 to 4,000 attacking ticketing systems. So until you address the problem of ticket touting, it's going to be an arms race between bad actors with very clever coders versus the ticket companies. And it's a pretty unbalanced battle. What we need is legislation as they have in Ireland, which stops touting. We've not seen a single ticket on a secondary platform for Oasis in Ireland, so the legislation very clearly works. And if that was brought in the UK, as Labour are proposing, you would get rid of the touting, you would get rid of the price gouging by the touts, but also you would strip away the straw man that this necessity for dynamic pricing hides behind, i.e. it's an anti-tout strategy, which is very clearly not.
let you have the final word on this, Roger. Do you think this is a worrying sign for the music industry in general? Or, as I said before, is this sort of the preserve of certain bands, like your Oasises, like your Adeles? Is this going to affect further down the chain, the smaller bands? What does this mean for the industry as a whole, do you think?
I think it does affect smaller bands. I've got a band playing in on October the 12th in Hebden Bridge Trades Club. They're called Wax Tree Cast, and they are going to sell less tickets because of this. I think
Give me their ticket price. Let's give them a plug. Let's give the smaller bands a plug. Tell me how much they're going for.
12 quid for Wax Tree Cast.
There you go. Bargain.
No, but that's like a ridiculous example of it. But it is a real thing because there's so much money involved in these tours. It's a huge amount of money. And if you have dynamic pricing on top of that, that's extra money being sucked away from it. On top of that, the industry itself starts to go, well, this is where all the profits are. So we will focus our model more on doing this. And in the context of new bands really struggling, streaming has really, really made it difficult for new bands as well. It hasn't helped. I think some sort of system should be put in place to correct it. If you're doing dynamic pricing, I think there should be a levy on it, some sort of windfall tax that says, okay, the excess that has been made through dynamic pricing should go back into new small venues and grants to new artists. And it would be helpful, at least as a beginning, to look at it.
OK, Roger Morton, music manager, really good to talk to you, and Reg Walker, ticket security expert. My director was really quick on the maths there. He said you get 33 tickets to come and see your band for the price of one Oasis ticket. Sounds like a good deal to me. Might be a UK Tonight outing. Right, gentlemen, really good to talk to you tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Still to come on the programme, after suffering a fall earlier this summer, Sir Ian McKellen says he is keen to get back on stage. Plus, he drops a hint at more Gandalf to come. And all the day's sport coming up, including a straight sets win for Jack Draper. He's now clinched a quarter-final spot at the US Open. Details on the way.
Kingdom.
These last few years have seen some huge stories. And these stories have been driven by politics, by politicians, the people in power.
You must stay at home.
And it's my job to figure out how these decisions made by politicians impact all of us in our everyday lives.
This is the worst thing I've ever been through in my life.
People turn up here with their child stuff in a black sack and just say, I don't want to.
And that is what it is. It's first-class poverty.
Is this an example of the welfare state failing?
We take you to the heart of the stories that shape our world.
These are stories that affect us all. Millions of children are now having to catch up. Some stories have changed all of our lives. Because like the residents, the staff are being infected. Politicians, they make decisions all of the time, and it's our job to hold them to account. I wonder if you will take this opportunity to apologise to those families. But in the end, the real power doesn't actually lie with the politicians. The real power lies with the people. I'm Nick Martin. I'm the People and Politics correspondent at Sky News.
Welcome back. Coming up, Ian McKellen tells Sky News why he is rushing his return to work. But first, Jasper is here with the sport. We were talking about Oasis during the break, but we're going to concentrate on the sport. No more Oasis chat for us. And British tennis could have a new men's superstar.
It could indeed, Sarah-Jane. This was a statement performance from a certain Jack Draper this afternoon in the US Open. The British #1 through to his first ever Grand Slam quarter-final. He eased past Thomas Mahac of the Czech Republic, 6-3, 6-1, 6-2 in straight sets. Such a stylish performance. It was befitting of a certain Anna Wintour watching on. So big audience for him. Only the 5th British man to reach the US Open quarter-finals in the Open era. The first since Andy Murray back in 2016, who, of course, we saw retire this time last month. Draper mentioned Murray in his post-match interview, saying he's missing being next to him in the changing rooms and he misses his stinky shoes. But it looks like he is going to be the one to fill those shoes for British men's tennis. It was a really commanding performance from Draper.
Oh, yeah, I was reading an interview with Jack Draper earlier this week where he was saying he used to go to New York for these kind of events and treat it as a bit of a tourist trip because obviously he wasn't that big a star, but now he's taking it really seriously and staying in his hotel room, eating right and watching TV for prep. In terms of the quarter-finals, what awaits him there?
So, really interesting one. Clash of the Australians coming up later on tonight. The 10th seed Alex de Minaur takes on Jordan Thompson. Alex de Minaur, we saw, beat Dan Evans in the 3rd round. He, of course, is the boyfriend as well, de Minaur, of British #1 Katie Boulter. So a little bit of a rivalry going on there. If he gets through that, Draper could face world #1 Jannik Sinner in the finals. We look forward to that. But for now, let's get the rest of today's sport.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality. Getting more people more active. Live life with Vitality.
Anna, nice to speak to you. I mean, I'm sure you're well aware, and you get asked a lot, that Jurgen Klopp was the former manager at Liverpool. But the fact that he was here for 8 years, and the way that team played, and for the players, the system is so ingrained in them. How much of a challenge has that been for you in the pre-season to get your ideas across?
Maybe in pre-season not that difficult because the ones that were there were not the ones where Jurgen worked with for so many years. And I think it helped that we had some good results over there. Players and also people around us were positive about the way we played. But I think one of the main things why, if they buy in, which is I believe they do, but why they do is that the differences are not that big. So there are only small differences between Jurgen and me, and the general idea of how we want to play football is, I think, quite similar.
What would you class as the biggest difference then between your type of football and Jurgen's, if there is any?
Yeah, I would prefer not to come up with it myself because now people are going to emphasize on it. But I think, although it's difficult because I saw many Liverpool games, we didn't see all of them. But the way I looked at it was that they used every moment they could to play the ball in behind or deep. That meant that the game was always.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality.
Ian McKellen has been telling Sky News that he is rushing his return to work after falling off stage back in June. He has been speaking to our arts and entertainment correspondent, Katie Spencer.
He is one of our best and most beloved working actors. While legions of orcs can't stop Sir Ian McKellen, a fall from the stage whilst playing Shakespeare's Falstaff in June almost did, leaving the 85-year-old with a broken wrist and a chipped vertebrae.
There was such a hoo-ha in the press. It was as if I died and I was reading my own obituaries. I must say there's some very nice ones.
That's nice to know.
But it wasn't as bad as it sounded, and I felt ashamed of myself, and I felt I'd let the audience down, and I felt guilty. And when I've swept those out of the way, I'll get back to work. But in the meantime, I'm having a bit of a rest.
Has it changed your outlook on what you want to be doing next year?
No, I'm just aware there isn't much time left, and so I'm only giving myself 3 months off instead of 6 months.
Over the last 10 years, you've compared me to livestock, creatures of the sea, and an extinct bird. It's going to stop.
This film, The Critic, is the first we've seen of the star on screen since. In it, he plays a powerful London theatre critic in the 30s who lures a struggling actress played by Gemma Arterton into a blackmail scheme.
This is only the beginning.
It was an amazing cast in general, but, you know, everything just... Rarely do you get the opportunity to work with, you know, icons. So, I mean, he's an icon.
Well, it's my responsibility to discourage our readers.
Sir Ian's character ruthlessly catty with what he writes, and in real life he claims to have confronted some journalists who have dared to question his artistic methods.
I have nothing bad to say about critics, and occasionally when I have had something bad to say, I've said it to their face, to no effect, because they've immediately capitulated and said, "You're absolutely right, I was wrong."
Oh.
I said, "Well, print that in your damn newspaper then."
Get off the road! So a little break for now, but with news of new Lord of the Rings films in the works, fans wouldn't want to be without a certain wizard leader.
I'm told Gandalf's involved, but I'm not yet told how much he's going to be paid or how much he's going to say, so I think we'll leave it there.
Audiences no doubt delighted to hear he'll be back soon. Katie Spencer, Sky News.
Thank you, lovely.
On the UK Tonight, catch up on the highlights on our webpage. Just scan the QR code on your screen. We'll be back tomorrow night at 8. See you then.